righty.
Right.
Thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and our listeners. And we've got President of AUPE, Alberta's largest representation of union, largest union in Alberta, President Guy Smith. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Bryce.
Absolutely. So, my first question is a loaded question because there's lots going on. This world and this province, this country is kind of all over the place right now. So, with the current economic climate, with the political climate, both provincially and nationally, how are you guys doing? How's things holding up?
Well, as you can imagine, Bryce, it's been probably the most challenging year and a half in certainly my experience as being president for the last 12 years. I mean, I'm used to challenges. I like challenges. I like fights. That's why I got into the labor movement in the first place. And, that's the role I've been playing as president, to make sure that workers are able to stand up and fight for their jobs, fight for their communities, their families. And yes, there's no doubt that because of the current pandemic, that's thrown a real wrench into how we operate as a union. We're member-facing. We like to interact personally with members. We like to be part of a larger group of people, and obviously we haven't been able to do that. So our whole basis of organizing and getting members prepared and building that strength has been really impacted by the pandemic, and we found other ways of doing it. We've been creative, like the rest of the world has, but I do know that it's affected our ability to fight back on a number of fronts. And not only that, our members are on the front lines of this pandemic.
Yeah,
their focus is to get Albertans through this, to stay healthy themselves, and to make sure we come out on the other end. But obviously, as you mentioned, there's a number of forces, particularly from the provincial government, that are trying, at the same time as we're dealing with this pandemic, are trying to undermine our members' rights, undermine the work that they do, undermine them at the bargaining table. So we're taking this on a number of fronts in an environment that we're not able to get the kind of movement that we need to do. Although I think we're doing a fabulous job, and certainly, our leaders, our activists, our members throughout the province are doing that job still where they can, whether they're on the work site or whether it's through digital methods, and obviously our staff are working hard as well. So really, we're trying to maintain that momentum that we had going into the pandemic while we're facing these major challenges. So, I have to say it's been very interesting, but, we're a tough bunch.
Yeah.
And it's a union that's been around for just over 100 years.
Wow.
We've been through many of those challenges. I've been involved for 35 of those years. And, with each new challenge comes new opportunities, and you learn and grow from that.
Yeah. So president for 12 years. So you've seen essentially three real big shifts in government, roughly about three, I would say, with just the different leaders coming in, right? How is it for you guys to adjust? I mean, like every time someone comes in, it's new ideas, new processes, new thought, regulations and whatnot. For you guys to adjust, that you got to be on your toes.
Well, we have basic principles by which we stand by.
Right.
That we protect workers, that we support and protect public services for the people of the province. And regardless of the stripe of government that's been in power, over the last decade or more, that's always been our goal and our principles. And each one of those governments, to varying degrees, has tested us on those principles, and we've pushed back. I think, though, that the current UCP government is much more ideologically driven. They're much more aggressive. Some would say they're dictatorial in the way they try and push their agenda. And obviously, Jason Kenney got elected on a certain agenda, which was anti-public services, anti-workers' rights, and even during the pandemic, as I said, they're attacking us at the bargaining table, but they've also brought in numerous pieces of legislation that undermine workers' rights. At the same time as we're trying to support Albertans through this pandemic. But regardless of the government, we have our principles, we have our democracy, we have our direction, and I certainly have my perspective that I brought into this role. It's a perspective I've had since I was young, which is take on the bosses and build that sense of power and solidarity amongst workers. So that will never go away, regardless of which government comes in. But I think in my 12 years, I've seen 5 or 6 premiers now,
yeah, that's right.
and tried to build relationships with them, which is been very challenging at times. And, not only the premiers, but their ministers as well.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think it's important to be flexible enough to be able to know where those governments are going, anticipate that, and prepare members for it. So we'll see. There may be another change in the next couple of years. And I think for those of us who've been around in Alberta a long time, when it was just, basically, the same party in power all the time, the flavor of it may have changed over the past 50 years or so, but we've seen so much change in the last 10 years, right? And there could be another change coming. I keep telling our members, one way or another, we'll get through this, right? We'll get through the pandemic. We'll get through the attacks at the bargaining table. We will survive this. But let's never forget that regardless of what government gets elected, that we have to maintain our strength, our focus, and our solidarity.
Yeah. Speaking of solidarity, which is a real strength that the union has, obviously, that's the definition of union, right?
Exactly.
Let's talk about some of the wins. You've been in this for over a decade. Let's talk about some of the wins over the last few years and some of the history of the union. Well, anyone stand out particularly?
Well, it's funny people ask me that because I always look miserable and stressed out. And believe me, I knew what I was taking on with this role. And it's probably, if you're doing it right, it should be one of the most toughest jobs in the province, if not in Western Canada. And it should be. Yeah. Because I challenge myself. I hold very high standards for myself and those around me, the other senior elected officers. But someone asked me once, so when were you happy? Am I really that miserable looking all the time? But there was a period, I think, we were in massive fights with the Redford government, the Alison Redford Tories, back in 2013, 2014. And we took them on, and we had massive fight backs, and we had a couple of strikes, wildcats and that sort of thing. But again, we were being attacked on many different fronts, and it really seemed at that time, this is overwhelming. There's no way we're going to win all of these. And one by one, we kept winning these smaller battles. And then when Premier Redford stepped down, it was pretty clear that in order for them to make room for whoever's going to take her place, and it ended up being Jim Prentice, that the interim premier was Dave Hancock. And the amount of stuff we got done in the 3-month period when she left and when Jim Prentice announced he was running, it was amazing. Yeah. So there was a couple of days there, I think in the spring of 2014, where I went, hey, everything is falling into place. But you know what? You remember those moments because they're special. But it doesn't just happen. It comes out of hard work. It comes out of struggle and the tremendous work of AUPE members and other unions, quite honestly, at the time. And we're just in one of those periods again. There will be light at the end of the tunnel. And even though we're taking hits right now, and it's probably the toughest struggles we've been in, that's what I was saying. I'm telling our members, we will get through this. We'll survive. The government may not, but AUPE is going to be here forever.
Gotcha. That's awesome. It's like the old saying, everyone sees the success up front, but they never see all that hard work behind, tremendous. Right? Oh, it was just given to them. No. That's years of blood, sweat, and tears. Exactly. And in your case, it's 95,000 members of blood, sweat, and tears to get the rights and the protections that employees deserve. Yep. So going into some of your staples, I guess, of the union, you guys talk a lot about anti-privatization, and that's a really big thing, and that seems to be the front end of the attacks right now that the union is facing. Can you give us some of your thoughts on just how this government is doing that and how that's kind of progressed over the years to today with privatization? With privatization. Yeah. Well,
privatization is something that sort of raised its ugly head back in the 70s in other parts of the world. But it was something that I first noticed when I got involved in the mid to late 80s, was something that we were hearing from the government of the day. And yes, there were big chunks of government services in particular that were privatized at the time. And I look at for our members in government services, when in the early 90s, before Ralph Klein, we had 32,000 members, and I think the population may have been, 2.5 million. That was just in government services. The population now is over 4 million, and there's only 23,000 in direct government services because all of that work has been privatized. And there was a minister of Ralph Klein called Steve West, Dr. Steve West, we call him Dr. Death, because he literally took entire ministries and completely privatized them. And obviously what that does, it's handed over to profit-seeking companies. So basically someone's making a profit off of taxpayer dollars, which should be going to services directly to the people of the province. It obviously throws unionized workers out of work, and it's detrimental to the services in the long run because there's a profit motive there. So we saw that in government services massively in the 90s under Ralph Klein. It's still occurring, but not at such speed. But we're seeing it more and more in healthcare now, and that's always been a threat to the public healthcare system in Alberta and across the country, quite honestly. And the move to privatize long-term care, which is again started a couple of decades ago, is really ramped up, and it wasn't slowed down even when the NDP was in power. So we see a lot of for-profit, private long-term care, providers in this province. And really, what it is, it's profiteers coming in like pirates in their ships to this land we call Alberta. And they're basically taking public funds to pad their own bottom lines and their shareholders.
Yeah.
And some of these, particularly the private long-term care operators, are very wealthy. And we're seeing it now directly in healthcare when it comes to laundry services, much of which was privatized in the Ralph Klein era in the 90s, but the few remaining ones have now been, contracted out or privatized. And we're looking at other areas of hospital services as well. And it's interesting, I don't know if you noticed, Bryce, but it was just announced yesterday in British Columbia that all of that privatization in sort of hospital services, the cleaners, the maintenance workers, the food service workers, they were privatized in BC almost 20 years ago. The BC government is now bringing them back in-house. So they'd be direct employees of the health authorities, which is great.
Yeah.
Because they, the government in BC recognizes they haven't saved any money. The quality of services is lessened, dropped, and the effects on workers has been horrendous under privatization. So that will be a mantra of any right-wing government that you see across the world. It's to cut public services and cut the unionization rate in public services. So it's been an ongoing theme ever since I started getting involved in the 80s. It's ramped up here and there, but it's still very much alive and unfortunately well and operating within Alberta.
It's sad that it took 20 years for them to realize that kind of to see the negativity of that move and then have to recover. And that's such a waste of time, growth, potential to waste 20 years of going one direction. Yeah. So we would hope that Alberta can take a snapshot from that, learn, and not go in that direction, especially in healthcare. Because, healthcare right now, I think, is the news everywhere. It's the most frustrating thing to be looking at because of these rollbacks. And like you were saying, the heroes of this pandemic right now are all of a sudden getting this crazy pitchfork attack of no, we're going to change it this way. You guys got to all cut back. It doesn't make any sense. For you, your brain is going always. All the time, right? How do you work with the logic and the realities that are coming out? You must see some of these policies and whatnot brought through with the government and go how are you looking that logically? Right. It doesn't make sense. Right. And the reality, it doesn't work. How do you kind of, and then you got to go back out and communicate that hey, thanks for the piece of paper, but do you realize this doesn't really communicate properly? Right. How do you go about with that?
You're right about my brain always on, which I don't mind. I like that challenge. Yeah. Sometimes it is somewhat overwhelming because every day there's a new challenge, a new twist, something that you have to look at in a certain way of how are we going to resolve this? And like you say, how are we going to communicate this? Mm-hmm. What's the end game with this? And I always look at it, I'm not a very good chess player, but I always look at life like a chessboard. It's not about this move, it's about the 5 moves down the road, because you make a move, what's going to be the counter move and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so I do like sorting that stuff out, and I really like bouncing ideas and strategies off my elected officers or my staff. I like figuring things out. But it can, like I said, it can become overwhelming, and it's frustrating because you know that it's not about logic. You know it's not about decisions made in good sense by a government or a boss somewhere. It's made out of ideological persuasion, and they will do things not based on facts or logic, but based on how to keep their voters happy. And I think what we're seeing in Alberta is, you of course, Premier Kenny got elected on creating jobs and that sort of thing. I mean, what leader wouldn't run on a platform like that, right? All we've seen is him killing jobs, and all we've seen is this mess that's being created, and this sort of almost, virulent sort of possession to push through an agenda, which Albertans are going, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Right? And there's backlash on that. Obviously, we're seeing the most unpopular premier in the province. And our members go, yay, he's on his way out. I said, don't be so sure. I know about Jason Kenney. I've only met him once or twice, but I know about him, and he will go down fighting. And the fact that he's in trouble makes him actually more volatile and more reckless. And I think, just preparing us, and I guess that's the way my brain works. It's not about what I see in front of me, it's what do I see on the horizon that may be coming, and how do we get there safely? Mm-hmm. So yeah, constantly thinking, constantly working stuff out. I mean, before I did this role as a president, I was a musician. I used to write songs. I don't think I've written a song in 10 years because there's no space in my head for it.
You're going to have 10 albums after this run.
Yeah, well, hey, I hope so. But the point being is that it made me realize there's, the brain is just full of work all the time, right? And as tiring as that can be sometimes, Bryce, it's what our members deserve. They deserve that kind of attention, that kind of thought process. I'm not saying they always agree with my thought processes or what I decide, and that's fine. Yeah. And I think it's important that that I remember and recognize, and I certainly do, and I enhance and celebrate our democracy and the fact that there needs to be as much input as possible, especially with such a diverse union. You talk about 95,000 members, and we are the largest union in Western Canada, right? The diversity is amazing. Yeah. Where our union is made up mostly of women of color. We have an extreme, patchwork and a beautiful rainbow, if you like, of members. And I don't think their voices are being heard. Mm-hmm. They're marginalized, and they're seeking that level of equity and that level of input that our other members are. And that is one thing I really would like, before I leave this position, that there's more opportunity for our marginalized members to have a voice, have a say, be in elected positions, and be able to represent their needs and their struggles. Because as much as our members are struggling and some they're under attack, can you imagine what it's like to be a marginalized worker? A black woman, a single mother, where English is your second language. It's tough enough just being a middle-aged white guy like I am.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine what some of our members are going through right now. And I think this is I as you can tell, I got a little bit of an accent. I come from England originally. I moved here as a kid, but I've lived in Alberta for the last almost 50 years. And I love this province. And I think that the people of this province are fascinating. They're fabulous. But the amount of division that's being intentionally driven into our population is sad, because it's splitting people apart, and it's being done intentionally. And I think that's wrong. And I think that one thing that we need to achieve as a union, and unions across the province need to achieve, is by stitching that all back together. But the only way you can do that is if you include everybody. And I know that we haven't done as good a job as I want to in that, and I really want us to push harder for that. Because Alberta is a changing place. When I came here in the 70s, that there wasn't as much diversity, there wasn't as much cultural awareness. There certainly wasn't much cultural awareness around things like Indigenous rights and Indigenous history.
Right.
It's sad that that was forced to the front through tragedy, because it should have been recognized before. But now it is being forced to the front. We need to help push it further, and obviously rights of other marginalized workers as well. So I think that's the role of the union, is trying to stitch that fabric back together, which is being ripped apart by policies of this government and previous governments. It's never a job done. It will never be finished. But as long as you continue to have that perspective, to unite people on a common front and unite all people equally, I think that's the way we're going to heal this province. There's going to have to be a lot of healing done. I'm really concerned.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
You talk about diversity. You're so bang, like you've nailed the nail on the head. It's really diversity in this province is so huge, and like it wasn't back earlier 50 years ago, but now it's kind of become the new foundation of this province. And you make a great point, and that leads me to one thing I want to talk about with the union is because of the diversity, and like you said, English is a second language, different backgrounds, different education structures, and so on and so forth. Education to strengthen the union of these people and these workers is so important, and knowledge is power. We've heard that saying eons ago, right? Knowledge is power. And I know that the union really focuses a lot on your education platform within your organization. And that is such an important thing, knowing that like, hey, this is what you're getting paid for. Do that.
Yep.
You're not getting paid for that.
Right.
Be careful, right? And I think that people are always looking for the opportunity to squeeze a little bit more there, squeeze a little bit more there, mostly employers, right? Squeeze a little there, squeeze a little there. And educating your members is a big thing. Can you talk a little bit to the education that you guys are pushing out? That's part of being a union is the education that you give. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm actually very proud of our education program. Obviously, when I was starting off as a union steward on my work site, I took as much education as I could from AUPE, and I think one of the things that we're proudest of is our union steward training. We have a great group of stewards who are the eyes and the ears of the union on the shop floor. So that's sort of the basis of our training, as a very rigorous union steward training and it can go to a very high level. I think over time we've adapted and changed our education program to the changing needs of our members, and one of them is diversity issues. We have a number of courses around diversity, recognizing diversity and breaking down the barriers to solidarity, because employers and governments will use difference to build walls between workers, and we're trying to break down those walls. So again, that's very much the focus in terms of where we're going with everything in our education program, is to bring everyone together. So yeah, we have a number of core courses, and then we're adding sort of ad hoc as needed. For example, our most popular course right now is training up people to be picket captains, because again, it's preparing for that fight, hoping that you don't actually have to end up on picket lines, but if you do, you're prepared. So it's very adaptive to the situation at the time. But I'm very pleased that thousands and thousands of our members take their education courses through AUPE. Some of those courses are recognized for credentials at universities like Athabasca University. So it's a high level of learning. But the other thing is that members can really decide at what level they enter into and whether they want to continue, and it can grow from there. Again, the pandemic has hit that hard, right? Because we did have some online courses even before the pandemic, but most of it was face-to-face, in person, where you can feel the solidarity.
Yes.
And we had to switch that to online learning, which does impact that. So, one of the things that we decided we have an annual labor school, which sort of a high level training, campus style, so that folks can focus on not just the training, but be part of, again, building those links of solidarity and those bonds of friendship. And we had to cancel it, obviously, this past year because of the pandemic. So we're focusing on maybe 2022 bringing it back. Okay. And I think that would be a sign that we're out of the woods when it comes to the pandemic. But as we've seen, you cannot predict that stuff.
This thing is crazy. Yeah. I know it's all over the place. The yo-yo, right? Up and down, up and down. And you're saying like community. Community is so important, and face-to-face really helps community. I know we've done a lot of in our company. We've done a lot of meetings with other organizations, and they've been working. They've got new people that have come in that they've never met. Yeah, like they've been working with them for 5 months or the year, and they've actually never met that person in person. Right. It's and that's got to be challenging for any organization. But for one like yours that really focuses on community and focuses on, like you said, solidarity, it can be tough. It can be done, but it is a challenging road. So
it is, and you have to balance. That. I mean, I'm frustrated with having to meet everyone, digitally. I can't wait to be back amongst the membership again. And obviously, everyone's feeling that way. But we have to look after the health and safety of our members first and foremost. And Bryce, probably better than anybody because your company assisted us in running our virtual AGMs. We really appreciate that. But you saw how much, you did a lot of that work to get us there. And you probably heard a lot of comments from people saying, "Oh, I'm fed up with this." Well, we all are. Nobody likes to do it this way, but we have to. And I think the fact that we were able to pull off close to 400 annual general meetings across the province with your company's help was helped us at least stay connected even during these difficult times. But we're all done with this. But what can you do? I mean, this virus isn't going to just go away because you tell it to. Like Jason Kenney thinks he can. I mean, how reckless is that?
The restrictions lift at midnight.
Right.
Did the virus cancel at midnight?
Yeah. Best summer ever.
It expired.
Right?
Exactly.
I mean, and I've been obviously watching this closely. Leaders across the world, and in particular, what's happening in Britain, because I still have family and friends there. And again, the missteps taken by some of these leaders. Now, don't get me wrong; it must be really challenging to be in that level of leadership during this crisis. But that's what leaders do. They try and deal with crisis, and they do it sensibly. And I think it's we're into a fourth wave here, which is bigger than anywhere else in the country. And that's down to the lack of leadership of the Premier. And the fact that I know he showed his face on Facebook yesterday, but he hasn't been in front of the media or been scrutinized since August the 9th in the middle of a crisis. It's just unbelievable. It's an abdication of responsibility and leadership.
Yeah. Going back to something you said earlier where, your brain is always going, right? And people and communicating what's going on in your brain, but also people need to trust you as a leader, as any leader, right? People need to trust you because you're doing the thinking that they put you in position to do for them, so they don't have to do the thinking, so they can kind of carry on with their lives, right? And that is something, like you said, you have to have a personality. You have a personality that's very unique to this job because you thrive on that. And that's important in any leader. And so for you to be the person that says, don't worry about it, I'll think about it for you, so you don't have to think about it, trust me. And communicating that is always very difficult because if they're not thinking about it, then they're like, well, why'd you do that? Well, because I had to think about it, and this is why I do it. So it's very respectable for someone in your position as a leader to have to do something like that.
Right, and no pressure, right? I mean, but the thing is, I don't know if I ever say to the members, trust me. I say, listen to what I have to say and challenge me. Yeah. And if there's debate to be had, then let's have it. But at the end of the day, I will tell you why and how I came to that decision. Because there's no way I can that everyone's ever going to, always agree with me. And they shouldn't, right? When everyone's agreeing, nobody, that there's not enough debate and strategizing and decision-making going on. So really the pressure on me is, yes, to do a lot of that thinking, but it's also the pressure to build the conduits of communication and to build the processes that at least if people don't agree that they can, make their voice heard, right? And that even happens in the smaller groups like the executive committee or the provincial executive. I encourage that debate, right? But the debate has to be done respectfully,
right? And
it has to be done from a basis of wanting to learn, not just wanting to yell at someone.
Aggressive.
Right,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I'll tell you, Bryce, one thing I've noticed is that the tone has really changed during the pandemic. People are frustrated. Yeah. They're angry. For our members, they may be just angry.
Divided, like you said, divided.
Right.
Yeah.
And their anger is often directed at us as a union because that's a safe place, right? They can
they can see you,
right?
I can yell at that because I can see it, right? Yeah.
And so I understand that. And the message you may have heard me at some of these meetings that you've helped us hold is that don't assume that everyone's doing okay. Don't assume I'm doing okay.
Right.
Don't assume that me as a person, as a parent, as a family person, isn't being affected by this. I'm going to assume everybody is struggling here.
Yeah.
And let's give each other the leeway to just be gentle with each other, even if we're talking about tough issues. And again, I think that the rhetoric we see, poured onto Alberta, is fanning the flames of people not being able to sit back and actually look around and say, yes, I feel like crap, but probably so is everyone else. So let's be a little kinder and gentler with each other so we can get through this without tearing each other apart.
Yeah. This has been so difficult. We talk about mental health on this show quite a bit, and the mental health of people, the bombardment of media, but also the economics of where the province is. Yeah. And then you're sitting there going like, I got a mortgage, I got kids I got to put to school, I got food to put on the table, and now I got to think if I'm going to have a job tomorrow or not.
Yep.
Has got to be like against, just aside from the divisiveness of everybody that divided, just the pressure, like you said.
Yep.
And it's so true. Like we as species, human species, need to be more cognitive of our neighbor, and is like, they're going through stuff we don't know. Yep. Well, I talk a lot about that. Like my wife being a foreign worker originally, the stuff that she was going through before she had to get into the job market here and then put up with that.
Right.
And then you get yelled at by people and they're like, man, like you have no idea what that person's going through in their personal life. And we all have that, and we all give a little to make the machine keep going.
Right.
But that's that's something, again, as a leader, you got to be cognitive of that always, even having conversations. And we're in a world too where language is so important, and what we use in different scenarios, and being cognitive of what people are comfortable with, taking physical out of it. Now it's language because we're not meeting in person. Right. So that's such a crazy world.
Yeah.
Going, because you mentioned chess games, I'm thinking five moves ahead. So for the union, in your mind, the 5 moves ahead, and I don't want you to give away any secrets here, but the 5 moves ahead, where do you feel, what's your vision for the union, let's say another 4 years, 5 years?
Well, I am so focused on the here and now, Bryce.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to do that. I know the immediate tasks at hand are keeping our members healthy and safe through this pandemic. It's supporting them wherever we can, and recognizing the tremendous amount of stress that all of our members are going through. And I know that a lot of focus is on healthcare, but it's much more than that, right? Yeah. In all the services our members provide, whether it's government services, education, boards and agencies, everywhere. So really, I am so focused on the here and now that it's the 5 moves ahead see us successfully getting through this pandemic with as much health and safety and mental health intact as possible. Making sure that we are successful at the negotiating tables we're at. We're at multiple tables, some very important ones, to resist the concessions and the rollbacks and that thing, and try and build in some job protection for our members. So what's happening at the bargaining table is part of the next steps. I think regaining some things that we have lost as a union over the pandemic, rebuilding that solidarity, rebuilding the action, right? Before the pandemic, we had, in 2019, we had a summer of action, which was brilliant because people felt that power. I need our members to feel their power again.
Yeah.
So those are more immediate than long term. I think that regardless of whether there's a change in the next provincial election or not, there probably will be some sort of shift that we can, move to take advantage of, right? But right now we're at war, and I can't really think about what the end looks like because so instead of playing one chess game, sort of thinking what are the 20 moves ahead, I've got 20 boards at once, thinking what's the next move for each one, right? And so as I said, I've been around a long time. We've been through a lot. I am an optimist, although sometimes that optimism gets questioned. In my own head, I question it. But I do believe we will come out of this. And I think by taking those methodical steps, dealing with the one issue at a time that we can, even though there's multiple issues, is the way forward. So I mean, talk to me in a year's time because this next year is going to be fundamental in terms of what we're able to achieve, what we're not, what this province looks like.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm always curious about what the future holds, but right now, because it's so volatile and uncertain and unknown, it'd be very interesting to check back, in the future and say, wow, we made it, or wow, we didn't.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
Eh? And that multiple, like I know you say you're doing so many different bargaining tables and things like that, and a lot of those are key moves.
Yep.
Like if this doesn't go through, that could ripple down to over here and so on and so forth, right? So it's all connected in a big line, and that's got to be. It's just I talk about Marvel all the time and the multiple timelines. I don't know if you're a Marvel guy, but anyway, it feels like that's where you're kind of going.
Right,
you're just playing the field here, and there's multiple fields of for lack of a better word, battle that are going on that are when you're in a group that big, if you lose a battle over here or win a battle over here, the rest of the battlefield see that and go, uh-oh.
Yep.
Or yay, okay, there's hope. We can keep moving forward, right? Yep. With the bargaining, time is such a because they prolong these things. It takes so long, and that's a game that gets played a lot, right? When it comes to time, and when you start putting things out there that we want to achieve this, or you're going to go to bargaining, how is that when that's running through your head? You want this done in a timely fashion. It has to be done in a timely fashion, and they push it apart, or however that game is played. When you're thinking about that, when we want to get something achieved, how does that play into the longevity that you have as the president of AUPE? I mean, you have these visions, and you want this done, and you want to see success. But how does time play into this for you?
Well, I'm getting older.
Yeah.
I mean, I just turned 59 this year, and I go, where did that go? I look at my two girls.
You're so
busy.
Busy. I can only imagine. It just flies.
What happened?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're right about sort of the timing of or trying to have some control over the timing of events.
Right.
That's the problem. Sometimes you don't have control. Sometimes you do. And I think, what you were saying about one thing having an impact on the other, that's absolutely correct. So in some areas you might want to speed things up, in some areas you might want to slow them down, and you may not. And the other side may be forcing it the other way, right? Time is relative. I am shocked how quickly it's flying by. That tells me how busy we are. But I also know that I am making sure that those around me, if I was hit by a bus tomorrow, that could walk in and do the job. And that's really important to me. Succession planning from day one was absolutely essential because I'm here at the pleasure of the members. At their will. And if they don't want that, that's their choice. But it also means that there has to be, it can't create a vacuum, right? And I've been very cognizant of that. So my time as not being president will come eventually. And I want to make sure that that the person that follows me doesn't sort of go, okay, where's the keys to the cabinet, right? Where's the launch codes? That they're actually very well prepared, whoever it may be. Yeah. I just want to make sure that that's created for them because, people in my position have a shelf life. And the most important thing for them to recognize is when that is, right? When that's done. For their own personal well-being and also for the well-being of the organization they represent. And I think it's so important that no leader assume that it's theirs for the rest of their life or as long as they even want it. It's theirs as long as they're doing a good job. And if they're not, they need to recognize that. And there have been times, I'll be honest with you, that I've had to question that, seriously, because I do a lot of self-analysis, right, in terms of, am I doing the right thing? Was that a mistake? And I've made mistakes, and that's fine too. And I think
that's what you do.
Yeah, and I think you need to learn from those. But I think for me, it's about the next. Probably, I am using the next provincial election as a bit of a benchmark, right, in terms of where we're at, what happens in that election. If this UCP government's thrown out, that will give us some breathing space. Yeah, I think, and it will allow us to
regroup, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I just know we're engaged in battle right now, and I want to help see our members through that if they're willing to have me help them through that.
You inadvertently went right where I wanted you to go, which was succession and your team. I want to talk about the structure of AUP. You've got your 6 VPs behind you there. Great group of people. I've had a chance to get to know them actually over the last little while. So you've got your 6 VPs, and then you've got your locals. I believe it's 33 locals, and you're about 384. I think you said chapters.
Right.
So that whole structure that you have, it's a lot to manage, but you've got a really great team behind you, and they have the full buy-in, and they're really looking to make things better as well, and they truly believe that it can get better, and that's been a great thing, being able to work with those individuals. Yeah. So that's good. That's a peace of mind, I hope, for you.
Absolutely.
That you've got that behind you. So
yeah. Well, look, we're all elected at convention. The members make good choices, I believe. And I've had the pleasure of working with numerous vice presidents and a couple of executive secretary treasurers while I've been in this position. And of course, I was 8 years as a vice president as well. So I've worked with multiple number of executive team members. But my focus with all of them is, we need to support each other. We need to disagree, absolutely. And we need to be able to tell each other when we don't we don't accept what someone is saying. We do that a lot, but we come out as a united team. And I think the members really appreciate that because they don't want it. And it shouldn't be resting on just one person's shoulders. And I do share it. And yes, over time, I've given more responsibility to the executive committee, and they've picked it up and run with it. And, that's what helps them get prepared for the next step if they choose to take it. Right. Having said that, there are amazing leaders beyond the executive committee, on our provincial executive, in our locals, just amazing activists, right? And so I look around and I see we're in a really healthy spot that I encourage that, the activists to move up, show what you're made of and show that you're a leader, because I see it in you and I want to help you get there as well. We are a team, and we're a family. Quite honestly, I look at AUP as a family, somewhat dysfunctional at times. but
what great family isn't? Come on, right, all the celebrities have had some skeletons in the closet.
Uncle, what's his name?
Exactly.
The point being is that I look at AUP members as part of my extended family, and I care for them, and some say too much. Like I take that to heart, right? That I actually do sincerely care what happens to our members, and if you've probably heard me say, you've probably heard me say also in these virtual meetings, I want to be there to give you a hug, right? I want to be, I want us to be able to show that we care for each other, because at the end of the day, it's that emotional attachment to what workers go through and what we can all do as a union that gets you through some of the darkest spots.
Yeah. Well, so much of our day to day is emotional.
Yeah.
And to kind of echo what you said, if the decision comes too easily, it's more than likely not the right one.
Right.
So if you don't have good, solid discussion, you don't know if you've explored all of the potential avenues to come to a solid, more the right decision, essentially, right? So that's great. Guy, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us today and giving us an insight into the union and the great work that you guys are doing. Thanks. It is a massive positive step for the province and especially for healthcare workers. I can't echo that enough because we're in the pandemic, right? I mean, I know there's so many different avenues. I mean, you've got road services, you've got laundry. You got remand and police. There's so many avenues that you guys are covered in, and they're all vital to our existence. And if they disappeared tomorrow, we would flip and notice, that's for sure. Yeah. And we can't let that happen. So it's great that you guys are on the front lines and representing those people that deserve representation.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
Again, thank you so much for coming in, and stay safe. And good luck in the future ventures that are coming up, and take care.
You too. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.